Shabbat Shalom. So you know how when they're passing a bill or presenting a bill in Congress, they sometimes try and come up with kind of cute acronym, and they yield a cute acronym. And so in 2012, there was a law passed in Congress. Actually, it passed earlier, but it was supposed to have taken effect in 2012, called the CALM Act, C-A-L-M, and I looked it up. I don't remember exactly, but something like Commercial Annoyance Limitation Measure, something like that. What it means is that by law, commercials on broadcast TV are not supposed to be louder than the program, okay? Because they usually are, right? The commercial, and I have to tell you that Kelly and I have become the last few months like radical cord cutters, so we can't watch live commercial TV anymore. We don't have cable, we don't have none of that. So I can't tell you whether it's actually observed or not. I can tell you that sometimes we watch like on Hulu or Peacock, so network shows, but a couple days later. And it definitely does not seem to be observed on Hulu or Peacock, right? To the point that, like, when a commercial comes on, I mute the TV because it is so loud, right? Because it's a problem for us because, you know, Kelly, not only is she hearing impaired, but she's also very sensitive to noise. It becomes really painful, right? But my late dad, had a cousin, Sue, who worked for General Foods in their marketing department. And she once told us, she said, you know, when you find a commercial on TV to be annoying, we know it's annoying. Okay. We made it annoying on purpose, right? Because the only thing that matters is you pay attention and you remember our product, right? And you go into the store and you see, oh yeah, I saw that on TV, right? And you don't say, I saw that on TV and the commercial annoyed the heck out of me, so I'm not buying that product, right? You remember that you saw that product. So they make the commercial annoying on purpose, right? Because,
sorry, I'm just getting blood.
oh, okay. Hello. Okay. Because you can have a great message, but if nobody's paying attention, what good does it do, right? And so that's why God tells Ezekiel, right? Take the sticks rather, and walk around Judah and Joseph, and like, yeah, you're going to feel really weird walking around with these sticks, right? I know you're going to feel weird walking around with these sticks, because everybody who sees you is going to say, what is that weird guy doing with those two sticks? And they're going to ask you, right? And they'll ask you, and you'll tell them. So I know it's annoying. I don't care. I'm God, right? You've got to do it anyway. But, right, that's the point, is to try and get attention to do something unusual so that people would ask questions, right? And it is a message of reconciliation, Joseph and the brothers reconciling, right? And as I mentioned in the introduction to the Torah reading, Judah was the one who first proposed to sell Joseph into slavery, and now he's the one to apologize and initiate reconciliation. Right? After the death of King Solomon in 720 BCE, the kingdom divides into two. You have the northern kingdom of Israel with its capital at Shem, and the southern kingdom with its Judah rather, with the capital at Jerusalem, right? And if you talk about the 10 lost tribes, who are the 10 lost tribes? The kingdom of Israel. They were conquered by the Assyrians and taken into captivity. I mean, I could say more about that, but maybe some other time, right? So Ezekiel prophesies that they will be reunited, what both symbolizes and is the necessary condition for that reconciliation: renunciation of idolatry and recognition of God as king, right? So unity for Ezekiel, it's both religious and political, right? They have to give up idolatry and recognize that God is king, and therefore the sort of petty squabbles that cause the two kingdoms to divide don't really matter because God is king, right? And Jewish unity is always a hot topic, right? So let me take a quick survey. If you are in favor of Jewish unity, raise your hand.
What does that mean?
If you're in favor of Jewish unity, raise your hand. Okay, what?
What is Jewish unity?
What is Jewish unity, right? Right. That's exactly the problem, right? Everybody, I mean, you think Jewish unity is a bad idea? No, but you don't know what it means, right? Very good, because I think when people speak about Jewish unity, what they mean is all the other Jews should be more like me. All the other Jews should be more like me, and then we have unity, right? Which is true, right? I mean, it'd be pretty boring, frankly, but we would have unity, right? But real unity is not everybody should be like me. It's we can disagree and still respect each other and still live in community with each other, right? And I'll give you an example of something that's going on right now. And again, I don't know like things that are big deals certainly to rabbis or to people who are like hyper involved in the Jewish community and like follow, may not even be on your radar screen, but a couple of weeks ago, there was a joint working group of the Rabbinical Assembly, the United Synagogue, and Women's League, and they put out this task force recommendation on how the conservative movement should evolve its policy towards Jews who are married to people who are not Jewish. Okay? And it's probably worth having a kiddish conversation to discuss what the task force actually said, good or bad, right? But I can tell you that certainly within the rabbinical assembly, there's a lot of disagreement about this recommendation, and I will tell you quite honestly that some of the recommendations in this report I strongly disagree with, okay? However, the discussions, at least within the rabbis, have been very respectful, right? It's like, I understand your motivation. Your motivation is good. Your proposal is not good, okay? And one of the things that for me sort of puts me in that category of saying, I really, really disagree, but I respect you, and I got to remember to be polite, is that the rabbi who's the chair of this task force, I was his Hillel rabbi, okay? And not only was I his Hillel rabbi, but in the fall of his senior year, I took him out to lunch, and I said, what are you doing next year? And he said, I'm going to law school. And I said, nah, we got enough lawyers. Right? Go to JPS. And obviously not very bright because he did what I suggested. Right? But he's the chair, so like, am I going to be rude and nasty? I mean, no, I'm not. I mean, you shouldn't, but especially, you know, I really have a relationship with this guy, right? So it's possible to have disagreement without being disagreeable, right? But that's usually not what's going on, right? And I think today we actually have less unity than at any time since the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay, and I'll give you an example, right? So, before the mayoral elections in New York City, I was listening to a podcast, and one of the participants is a very, very, very well-respected Israeli writer, commentator. He's originally from the States, and I've quoted him in sermons before, but I won't tell you. And he said, as far as he was concerned, any Jew who was going to vote for Mamdani is as bad as the Jews for Jesus. And I'm like, look, without taking sides, right? And you know, because I said that I had a lot of problems with him, and I don't know if I would have voted for him if I lived in New York. He was a very problematic candidate, but the other two were also very problematic. But to say if you voted for him, you're like worse than the Jews for Jesus, right? I mean, a third of the Jews in New York voted for Mamdani, right? And a majority of Jews under 40, right? You're going to just write them out of the community? Because because we have written Jews for, right? And so, you know, a thought experiment, right? Some organization calls me up and says, we want you to be on a panel discussion with a messianic rabbi from Jews for Jesus. Right? I will not have to think very long about whether to accept that invitation. But the answer is no, right? They call me up and they say, we want you to be on a panel with a rabbi who was a strong supporter of Mamdani. I'm going to say no. No, I'm not going to say no, right? A messianic rabbi applies for membership in the board of rabbis. No. A a rabbi who was an outspoken supporter of Mamdani applies for membership in the Board of Rabbis? Obviously, right? I mean, we're still one community, right? And so maybe that was just a hyperbolic statement, and in retrospect, he might say, that was kind of dumb, it's not exactly what I meant, right? But I don't know, but when you have that level of rhetoric, it becomes hard to have one community, and because the fact of the matter is, anti-Semites don't care, right? No, nobody's gonna, nobody's gonna say, are you right wing or are you left wing? Do you support Netanyahu or oppose Netanyahu? Right? They don't care, right? I mean, you think anybody asked all those people on Bondi Beach what their politics were before murdering them? Right? Remember 5 years ago, there was a mass murder in a kosher grocery store in Jersey City. You know who the people who were killed? They're Satmar Hasidim. Satmar Hasidim, strongly anti-Zionist, right? You see pictures of people, in Hasidic garb at a protest, right? Hasidic garb and a keffiyeh draped around their neck and sign, authentic Jews oppose Israel, right? Those are the people who were murdered, right? You think anybody asked them what their views are? Right now, I do not want to say that we let anti-Semitism define the boundaries of our community, right? So there's a problem that, right? But at the same time, we are one community, right? If only because we have common enemies, right? And we have to figure out a way to speak to each other and say, I disagree. And here, like Michael Scheib and I, we had an email correspondence back and forth yesterday, right? And about some issues with which we vociferously disagree. But it was always polite and respectful. Okay, and maybe because I was Michael Scheib's Hillel rabbi too, I don't know, right? I mean, maybe I should only have disagreements with people who I was their Hillel rabbis, and then we'd have Jewish unity, right? But we have to be able to disagree respectfully and say, you know what? I respect your motives. I just disagree with how you propose to solve the problem, right? Now, we're one community, but sometimes the boundaries of that community are a little unclear, right? Because, and this gets back to that discussion a little bit of intermarriage, right? Because we, as a conservative movement, we are committed to the traditional halachic definition of who is a Jew, right? If your mother was a Jew, or if you converted, you're a Jew, right? But even that is getting now, forget about the question of what is a valid conversion, right? What about the question of define now mother, right? I mean, if you have IVF, right, and the gestational mother is not the genetic mother, right? So you have, right, Jewish egg, non-Jewish womb, baby born Jewish, right? Non-Jewish egg, Jewish womb, baby born Jewish. And I'll tell you that the answer used to be the womb is determinative, right? Now even within Orthodoxy, people are reconsidering, right? So we say if your mother was Jewish, you're Jewish. Well, define the word mother. And I mean birth mother. I'm not talking about, you know, a lesbian couple where there are two legal mothers, right? Obviously only one gave birth, but no, so that's not so clear. And when we lived in Connecticut, I had a close friend who was a Baptist minister, and he discovered as an adult, he always knew that he was adopted. As an adult, he discovered that his birth mother was Jewish. So halachically, he's a Jew, right? If he showed up at my shul, would I give him an aliyah? Would I count him in the minyan? No, right? On the other hand, right, the comedian and actress Tiffany Haddish, right? Her father is Jewish, her mother not, but she very, very involved in Jewish life, right? She had a bat mitzvah reform a few years ago. She's done stuff. She talks about the importance of being Jewish. I'm not going to say she's not part of our community. No, she's part of our community, right? She identifies as a Jew. She participates in the community. I probably actually couldn't give her an aliyah, right? But, right, so the boundaries of the community are fuzzy and they're flexible, right? But let's not make those boundaries, you know, even more rigid. And, you know, I mean, I've said this before, right? It's not my job to only say things that you will agree with, right? If that was my job, let's just pass out mirrors and you can just talk to yourself and every word that you hear, you'll agree with, right? So, but we don't have to all agree with each other, but we have to talk to each other respectfully and civilly, or our community will be even weaker and more fragmented than it is. Yeah, Dave.
For those of you who didn't have access to Washington Post, Pope Leo's entire Albany County preaching to the entire community was all around respect and listening and not be separated by differences and political motives. It was very beautifully written. I didn't get to hear it, but I'm urging to take a look at it. It's very nice.
Right, and by the same token, the Urbi et Orbi message to the city and to the world, he ended his speech yesterday with a poem by Yehuda Amichai. Okay, I mean, that means a lot to me because I taught a mini course in Amichai's poetry, and I don't know, whoever would have predicted that the Pope from Chicago would end his major address with a poem, a translation of a poem from Yehuda Amichai. And I don't, you know, obviously he's got a staff of people who write stuff for him, right? But I don't know, I mean, it'd be interesting, to know, you know, Holy Father, you know, did you know about Amichai and want to put that poem in there, or like was that, you know, one of your one of your staff, either your Jewish Christian relations staff person or your contemporary poetry staff person. I don't know, but very interesting. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom.